So ladies and gentlemen, welcome to a brand new DC Studios News Roundup video. And today, starting off, we have to talk about Supergirl Woman of Tomorrow because we've had a brand new casting update here from The Hollywood Reporter saying Supergirl Woman of Tomorrow adds David Krumholtz and Emily Beecham. And guess who they're playing? Well, none other than Supergirl's parents, even though people are starting to point out that, okay, which parents though? The Kara Danvers, Earth parents, if you will, or really the Kryptonian parents. And we also have some news about Supergirl in Superman that we're going to get into in just a second. But I would just have to say that I think they are. I mean, I have no proof of this, but I think that this report would be about that. I think Kara is already on Earth. It's not like she arrives in the movie and it's like, hey, cousin Clark, or Kal-El rather. And I also just based this off what James Gunn has said back when he announced the project, Supergirl Woman of Tomorrow. Gunn said this is a very different type of Supergirl. In our film, we see the difference between Superman, who was sent to Earth and raised by loving parents from, the time he's an infant, versus Supergirl, who was raised on a rock chip off of Krypton and watched everyone around her die and be killed in terrible ways for the first 14 years of her life. And this is the important part that Gunn said himself, and then came to Earth when she was a young girl. So when she was a young girl, 14, right? And is much more hardcore. She's not exactly the Supergirl we're used to seeing. So knowing that Supergirl Woman of Tomorrow picks up when on her 21st birthday, I believe that, what he's referring to there, a chip off of Krypton, floating away from Krypton, Argo City, and she's probably sent away from Argo City because of the meteor shower that happens there, and it causes all kinds of problems. So in a similar way to Kal-El, it's kind of like, hey, we need to get Kara out of here. So then she comes to Earth. And also, as a result, I'm wondering with Supergirl's parents, given that Gunn is giving us a good idea of the origin he's somewhat striving towards here with Argo City, saying that she lived there for the first 14 years of her life and then came to Earth when she was a young girl, I think we can surmise, at least, hypothetically here a bit, I'm not saying this is the truth, that she maybe did come to Earth when she was 14, 15, and maybe 5 or 6 years has gone by with Clark kind of helping her be integrated into Earth's society, but she's been struggling year after year after year after year. And so at the beginning of the movie, she goes off to do the Supergirl Woman of Tomorrow thing. She literally goes, starts drinking on her 21st. She's in a place where there's a red sun, which is why in the comics she's susceptible to damage. She also will have, what they will do with that is tie in her origin and maybe help explain to us, how she got to Earth in the DCU's iteration. Maybe the movie picks up with that, and then we cut to present day DCU, and she's leaving Earth, and that's how we could see David Corenswet in the movie. As we've heard, Superman could be appearing in Supergirl, and I think that would be a good thing. I talked about this recently with how, with David Corenswet apparently maybe being in London as Supergirl was shooting, it would be cool for him to have a small scene trying to talk her out of going away to this other planet to celebrate her 21st, but she refuses, and so he sends Crypto to go along with her to keep her safe. That kind of thing, and then we pick up with the journey. So maybe a little origin intro of Argo City, floating on a rock off of Krypton, as James Gunn said, arriving to Earth as a teenager, but then growing up to be the Millie Alcock Supergirl 20/21-year-old that we're going to see in the movie. Now, I'm not saying the intro has to do anything like Blue Beetle, where you literally have the credits and you have the Beetle coming to Earth, but maybe they could do something like that at the beginning, but obviously then pepper in other parts about Krypton or Argo City and her parents throughout the film. But it's also totally possible, if you want to entertain some other theories out there, that when she arrived to Earth, that maybe she was captured. Similar to what we saw in the Flash movie, and similar to what we see in the trailer with this metahuman containment facility that Superman is in, but we see other metahumans behind Lex Luthor in this shot. And you could argue that Lex didn't really know, or the government, or whoever could have captured Kara, didn't really know what they stumbled across, let alone know know that she's related to Superman. So, she could have been enduring all kinds of horror, really, for the past 5 or 6 years. And that's adding a third theory on top of all of this now. That's just coming across my mind. Yeah, it would make sense maybe for her to have the Supergirl suit and have her already having maybe been on Earth for a while, as I've been saying, with Clark, so maybe not captured, because she's learning that through trying to be Supergirl, alongside her already established Superman cousin, it's something that she's not really gelling with so well. And like, is this really me? And that's why she flies off into space, and that's why, she still has a Supergirl suit while she's discovering herself and going on that journey with Ruthie. Now, another weird thing that's come out of this Hollywood Reporter article, and I call it weird because this is stuff that we've known for a long time now, or at least have heard about through reports for a long time. So the article goes on to say that the project was one of the first features developed by DC Studios, headed by James Gunn and Peter Safran. Alcock was picked as Supergirl almost a year ago and will first appear in Gunn's Superman movie. And now you have all the outlets and stuff saying, Supergirl is appearing in Superman. And good old DCU Leaks, which we've covered here a lot of times, and from Apocalyptic Horseman, covered this on December 9th, 2023. Although we didn't, and well, still quite don't know the nature of the cameo that Kara has in the Superman film. We've known about her appearing in the film, even if on a rumor level, from, fairly reputable insiders such as DCU Leaks and Apocalyptic Horseman, Daniel RPK, again, since December 2023. Now, Millie Alcock appearing in Superman, I don't really have much to expand on this other than what I was just saying. I'm going to shut up now. There's a random bunch of ideas for you, but let me know any and all thoughts. Now, a couple of other DCU updates. Here we have from DCU updates, but really from Daniel RPK saying, looks like we'll have both Sgt Rock and Waller will begin filming late this year. The momentum is great. So this is pretty crazy because, one thing that did feel out of left field for a lot of people, and we heard it from the major trades, is that Luca Guadagnino and Daniel Craig might be reuniting to do another movie out of nowhere, Sgt Rock, a prequel in the DCU, obviously, because we know Easy Company within DC is in the 1940s. We saw that in Creature Commandos. We know that G.I. Robot canonically served with Sgt Rock, and it was just kind of crazy to think that it would be a pretty epic steal for DC to get a casting of Daniel Craig as Sgt Rock, which I actually think is a really good idea. And, momentum reportedly was further along than what we thought. And now, one of the projects that we might be hearing about soon, because you may have heard me reference, and maybe other people, like we're apparently meant to be hearing things fairly soon in terms of new updates. Kind of like how out of nowhere we heard that Mike Flanagan's script for Clayface is going forward, and there's apparently a tentative release date, September 2026. So I guess we're going to hear that firmly about Sgt Rock, hopefully with the casting of Daniel Craig as well. You guys know my thoughts about this. This would be the second prequel, if I remember correctly, in the DCU, because we've got Paradise Lost that's in active development. Obviously, Sgt Rock maybe further along than Paradise Lost. Again, projects that were initially announced maybe popping up as in production eventually sooner than others. And my thoughts on this is that in the prequel phase of things, that we could be getting is that I would love a JSA project. It would be such a no-brainer to contrast the present-day superheroes we are going to be seeing in Gunn's Superman and in Lanterns, etc., right? It would be so cool that, hey, you've seen the present-day heroes in a couple of projects by this point. But now, let's take a peek back at the golden age of heroes. Like Gunn said, after all, that the world of metahumans, there's so many more of them than there used to be, and they're more of an issue today than they used to be. Okay, well, when we tie in the whole idea and possible influence of the Kingdom Come storyline with how a lot of the world may have become disenfranchised with superheroes compared to the days of old, right? And this is why you may have Lord Tech regulating certain heroes, this, that, and the other. Well, how cool would it be to see an actual Justice Society of America in in the 1940s with Wildcat, Hourman, Jay Garrick, Stargirl or Starman, whatever, right? And you can even chuck in Diana, Wonder Woman, in there because she's been around for a hot minute. It's no problem for her to appear in something like that. That would be so cool. I'm not against the Sgt. Rock film. I think that they can make this, seriously, like an Inglourious Bastards-esque kind of nuts level movie. And it'd be sick to see G.I. Robot there as well. But you could also, yes, have some JSA or like metahuman characters pop up in the Sgt. Rock movie. But I just get carried away with the idea of, now that we're going to see more and more of the present day DCU, obviously, right? Since we are, and we know we're getting prequels, give us something like a Justice League level kind of thing. So Justice Society. Back in the days when the Justice Society usually and typically exist. That would be so cool. So cool. But either way, I know I went off on another tangent there, as per usual. But Sgt. Rock seems to be, according to insiders, really picking up steam to be filming later this year. But I didn't talk about the other one, Waller. About time, right? Now, again, rumor here, but Waller apparently is going to be picking up steam later in 2025. And it's about time because, Waller was meant to come out before Peacemaker Season 2. Nothing's ever written in stone, as I've kind of said, but given that it was described as a Peacemaker Season 1.5, and we heard that Peacemaker characters were going to be in it, and now that's obviously no longer the case. Well, you could still have Peacemaker characters in it, but some of the story concept ideas must have changed, right? If it was going to be a 1.5 bridged thing to Peacemaker Season 2, and now that's been completely flipped on its head, it could still serve a similar thing, but continuing from the events of Peacemaker Season 2. And I hope that my ideas of Waller, setting up another group like Checkmate. Maybe she's been knocked down a peg. Maybe this is why Frank Grillo said that Rick Flag Sr. is going to be the director of Argus. Maybe she's been knocked down a peg because of what happened with, Pakola-stan and Ilana Rostovic and whatnot. I don't know, but she still has so many Black Ops level connections that she wants to start Checkmate, and that's why Sacha Bordeaux could be in Peacemaker Season 2. All of this kind of stuff. And if you don't know what I'm talking about there, I have got a whole video on that. I might make a whole separate video on it if, as of when we learn maybe more larger clues as to what Waller could be about. I do see potential in a Waller series, even though a lot of people don't. I think it could really flesh out some interesting things. Again, Checkmate, that I just don't think a lot of people are truly aware of, but, characters like Mr. Terrific and whatnot can get involved in that, alongside other really cool heroes. So, yeah, we're gonna have to wait and see and learn more about Waller, but about time. So, a little update here on DCU Batman. I know, don't worry, we're not gonna spend too much time on this because the saga kind of seemingly never ends, because we have an update here from DC Film News with an exclusive. Now, how reliable is DC Film News? I've said this time and time again that I regard them as very reliable, in the same vein as Nexus Point News, and for those of you who know those names, Now, I have seen a few comments with regards to this post saying, oh, are we really got to trust them? A page that was like pro-Flash when the movie was coming out, and they were once known as the Flash Film News before they were DC Film News. And I'm just like, I get the angle you're coming from, but that doesn't make them a liar just because when that movie was coming out, that was the page in where they were obviously promoting the movie itself, and they had a Batgirl Film News thing, and now they just kind of rebranded to everything DC Film News. Either way, just know that I know the people like working on this account, and they are not like BS people. Either way, as it currently stands with their exclusive, although Andy Muschietti and James Gunn have not met face-to-face since the filming of Superman, a source close to the parties confirmed Andy and Gunn speak regularly. Batman, the Brave and the Bold remains in development and will be separate from Matt Reeves' universe. Now, this isn't really saying anything that I didn't. I mean, I guess that they've got a source, like, reaffirming and emphasizing, hey, not only, like, did Andy come out in interviews recently and say this, but, like, I'm telling you, what he said is true. So what I was about to say in my previous video, if you look at those interviews, Andy never said that he hasn't spoken to him since before Superman filmed. That was misconstrued by a lot of people, and if anything, Andy Muschietti did say that they're working on the story and the tone, and that would mean that we would be me in the studio to some capacity or extent or another, right? So either way, I'm kind of poking the bear here of the comment section, but mini update. The way I'm going to see it is the way that Gunn has been saying it, the way that Matt has been saying it, and what I've been saying this whole time. The Batman, the Brave and the Bold is a DCU thing. Matt Reeves' Batverse is a separate thing. Yes, we can entertain that minds can change, but for now, let's just keep it on how the letter of the law has been said, despite how many of you may come out the woodwork and say, hey, Boba, well, isn't it so obvious that they're doing this? Look. Okay, until that happens, I'll talk about it when that happens. And one last thing about this as well, personally for me, I really want a separate DCU Batman. Not because I don't want Robert Pattinson standing next to Corenswet. Again, as I always say, I totally see the rose-tinted glasses vision of how cool that is. I really do. But for me, I love Matt Reeves keeping his really grounded, noir Batman. And a DCU Batman being cast eventually would mean that we get such a fantastical Batman to contrast that. So we kind of get the best of both worlds. And a DCU Batman will give us everything that we want in a truly fantastical world, in the ways that I've envisioned and described that I can imagine being like Telltale Batman, where you look at his wrist gauntlet and you actually maybe even have a hollow little kind of interactive screen. You have drone gadgets coming off of him, and doing reconnaissance while he's on a nearby rooftop. You wouldn't necessarily see Pattinson with all this, even though you could argue to me that's because he's in year 2, Boba, and they can retcon the Batman movies to be in the early 2010s. So by the time, I get what you're saying. I'm just saying, hey, keep Matt Reeves over there and give us everything glorious that is DCU, fantastical Batman with a new Batman casting. Let me know your thoughts. Do you think we should kind of close the book on this now until there is actually a significant ass update? And lastly, for this video, guys, I get to talk about my boy Swamp Thing, and this is an interesting update that I'm happy to dive into because it gives me a chance to tangent about Swamp Thing. But essentially, James Mangold did say something new. The issue is, all the outlets that were reposting us around didn't use that new quote. They used a different quote from something Mangold said quite a long time ago now, as if it was something new, which is leading people to now be like, oh, Swamp Thing's going to be standalone outside the DCU movie website. Of all these genres, it's perhaps surprising that Mangold will return to the superhero genre. This time with the DCU Swamp Thing, just like how his upcoming The Star Wars movie, Mangold told MovieWeb what's really important about his Swamp Thing film is Swamp Thing at DC. It's just a matter of, do we find a way on the page to say something original? And fair enough, new comment from Mangold there. And to put a pin in that, because we will talk about that in a second, the quote that people are talking about is something that Mangold said, quite a while ago in the past, as MovieWeb said, that while I'm sure DC views Swamp Thing as a franchise, I would be viewing it as a very simple, clean, gothic horror movie about this man-monster, just doing my own thing with this, just a standalone. So, as a result, you see how we've got to this segment in today's video, because everyone's being like, oh, Swamp Thing is not DCU, it's an Elseworld standalone kind of project, and, wait, what's going on? That is not the case. That is not what has been said recently by Mangold. What was said by Mangold is, do we find a way on the page to say something original? Now, my thoughts on that is just simply James Mangold saying, okay, with Swamp Thing, it's hey, we need to do something with him that isn't, and this is me kind of referencing a quote that we're about to get into from him in the past, in where, Frankenstein, it's alive, has been done before. So we need to kind of, as James Mangold said, he wants to do his own version of Frankenstein with Swamp Thing. How do we say something original here? And he does have a way of doing that. But let's go to the comment that's confusing everyone from Mangold that I spoke about, God knows how long ago now in videos. Honestly, this is deja vu for me. So in an interview with Josh Horowitz, James Mangold said something that I actually fully agree with in terms of how I think he as a director should execute this film. And he says, and I go, I'm not, it's no different speech than anyone else gets with me. I'm not really, I don't have any agenda for a universe. I'm not building towards someone joining in some future, have at it. But I'd just be interested in telling I've always been interested in doing a version of Frankenstein, basically. And yet I feel like, It's Alive has been done enough. Again, hence a reference to his new quote of wanting to do something original, despite his Frankenstein influences here. But Swamp Thing always occurred to me as this kind of wonderful version of a kind of Frankenstein story, much in the way of one of my favorite pop films of growing up, RoboCop, the original one, is such a, this guy who just wakes up and he's been turned into, he finds he's become this kind of machine. Also something, I was fascinated with Logan, obviously, but to me, the idea of making almost kind of a noir mystery horror film about a guy who wakes up and he's this thing, and there's an amnesiac quality of like, how did I get here and who did this to me? And so I'm envisioning a kind of horror noir film following a creature that can't be seen, trying to piece together from fragments of memory what happened and who did it. So when James Mangold talks about doing his own thing just to stand alone, and, initially, he says, he doesn't have any agenda for a universe, he's not building towards some joining in the future, how about it kind of thing. That doesn't mean that Swamp Thing isn't in the DCU. It's just that James Mangold's attitude is like, hey, James Gunn, if you want me on board, even if this is in your, like, again, as he's said before, I'm sure DC view this as like, a bigger franchise thing. But the way I'm seeing it, I've got like tunnel vision into just, I'm going to treat this as a standalone. And I think that's actually the best way for him to do it. So it is out there in the universe, even though Swamp Thing inherently, I think, you're not going to have David Corenswet Superman and Kara just flying in there and whatnot. It's always felt like it was going to be its own little thing that could broaden and branch out into bigger things beyond the first movie. But in the first movie, I think it's only a handy thing for a director to have like this blind tunnel vision to be like, hey, I'm going to make the best film I can make without the burden of like feeling like I have to like branch out to all of these other routes in the DC universe that James Gunn is making with all these other projects. We need to have Waller in there. We need to have Waller be like, what's that swamp thing in the swamp? I don't know. James Mangold doesn't give a shite about any of that. And I think James Gunn understands that, and since it's a movie and somewhat Origin-esque with how Swamp Thing's going to learn through pieces of fragmented memory of what happened to him, since it's somewhat of a movie that is very standalone in its own script anyway, or what will eventually be a script, he rather kind of let Mangold have that creative freedom with viewing it as a standalone, rather than saying as a co-CEO, no, James Mangold, if you want to direct for us, you need to have Amanda Waller in there, send some government people to investigate this Swamp Thing that there's been reports of, and basically we need to have some interconnectivity in there. You need to have John Constantine. You absolutely have to. Now, to be fair there, John Constantine would be pretty cool because, he was introduced in a Swamp Thing comic and he helped Swamp Thing kind of learn about himself. But either way, you get where I'm coming from with this ramble. It's not outside the DCU. I'm very confident about that, unless they do change things, obviously. This is just James Mangold tackling it his own way, and he doesn't want to be, burdened with, like, the lore of every other thing that's going on. He appreciates Swamp Thing as a DC character, and he's wanting to service that character in the best way he knows how, and that is to turn the lights off and only have the spotlight on one thing. And that is Swamp Thing, not the overall DC universe. But from where it goes from there on out, I hope that, we do get more, because I would like things to eventually lead to it. That's the only actual apprehension I have, despite the methodology of his way of directing and executing here that I agree with, is through him saying this, what is the future of Swamp Thing in the DCU beyond Mangold's Swamp Thing movie? Because I think we can understand, Mangold's got to handle the origin movie of this monster's emergence in that swamp, but are we going to have a different director handle what could hopefully maybe be, let's just say in Chapter 2, a Justice League Dark story, where you have Swamp Thing play into that, and it doesn't take away from Mangold's first installment in that character's projects in the DCU, but hey, he's still going to appear in a different project handled by somebody else, doing more of an ensemble-esque thing, maybe with Justice League Dark. I don't know, but hey, I do respect still like knuckling down, just be like, hey, I'm only going to focus on my character and everything like that. But at the same time, there are some apprehensions and where I hope through having such tunnel vision, it doesn't take away from the mysticism and fantastical aspects of this character in the DCU. I mean, obviously, if James Mangold's doing Swamp Thing, he understands he's working with some fantastical stuff. But what I mean by that is like introducing the Green and how they handle Alec Holland and the repercussions of all of that in this universe can build to these other things. And I'm sure James Gunn, despite wanting Mangold to do this, and he's happy for Mangold to tackle it the way he's tackling it, will still be like, hey, look, we kind of maybe want you to include like a reference to this larger elemental force, this, that, and the other, so it leaves things open for us to take Swamp Thing into a further field kind of story with other fantastical franchised things within DC that maybe you just don't really care about because you just want to make your version of Frankenstein movie, if that makes sense. I don't know. I can keep tangenting about this for a long time, so let me know your own thoughts down in the comments below, ladies and gentlemen, and on everything else in this video. If you enjoyed it, I would really appreciate a like. It takes 2 seconds of your time. Consider subscribing if you haven't done so already. A lot of you tell me that you think you are, but you might not be. And again, I keep getting comments saying, I'm one of those people. I thought I was subscribed. But until next time, guys, again, really appreciate your support. I hope you guys have a lovely rest of your day. And I'll see all of you people of the DCU in the next video. Goodbye.